first and foremost, let me welcome you, Kuhan. I feel like you should be welcoming me, or I don't know what we're doing, but this is your space and I'm thrilled to be in it. So welcome. Lovely, absolute joy to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that warm welcome. Great to be with you today as well. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, before we jump into the theme, in the
Yeah.
wildly unlikely event people don't know who you are, just tell me a little bit about um, who you are and what your interest is in this particular conversation. But obviously, you are, given that one of the two Parkies, you are obviously very much intimately involved with this discussion anyway.
Yeah. So I'll just rewind for a sec. So I'm Kuhan, and I have Parkinson's. It's not always obvious that I have Parkinson's, especially after my brain
Mhm.
surgery last year, which really helped. But like I keep saying, a lot of Parkinson's is about the stuff that you can't see, right? And I think that makes it quite challenging condition to understand. I was diagnosed 13 years ago now, at the age of 38. So I'm 51 now, and it's been a roller coaster ride, to be honest with you. And for a lot of that time, I spent not belonging, if I can put it like that. Really was in denial with my condition. I didn't really talk to many people about my Parkinson's. Didn't
Mm.
tell many people. Didn't even say the words out loud that I had Parkinson's
Wow.
for the first few years. So, classic textbook denial, went on with life, which served me quite well initially, but then didn't. And then a few years ago, sort of coinciding with COVID times, I decided to talk about my condition a little bit more. Met Dave, my co-host of Two Parkies in a Pod, as you mentioned, and we just started talking a little bit more about our condition and what we had in common, and the podcast sort of born from that. And yeah, until that point, I didn't really talk about the condition. Didn't feel comfortable. Was quite embarrassed about my symptoms. Quite embarrassed having to explain the condition. It was very isolating. So my interest in this area about belonging and about acceptance is, how do you square that with a condition that naturally isolates you, right? Um, and I've struggled with that, to be honest with you, and it's never ending. I think sort of opening up and talking to people in the community as I do, and fellow volunteers and staff members at Parkies UK have been wonderful. And providing that sort of safe community space has allowed me to sort of deal with my own acceptance of my condition and allow me to connect to some wonderful people in the community. I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I was listening this morning actually to one of the talks that you had, which was Stu, about what kind of Parkinson's do I have, and I thought that was such a
Yeah.
fascinating discussion. I thought it was really interesting, and I was particularly interested in it, by the way. And my cards face up on the table. One of our dearest friends has got Parkinson's, and what's been quite alarming is she's an older lady. I say older, she's sort of, just turned 70. And
Mm,
to see how quickly she's deteriorated has been, she was kind of going along really nicely, really nicely, really nicely. And then she's had something really quite dramatic happen. And it's really, it's quite shocking, particularly when this particular lady is probably the most brilliant mind you'll ever come across. And it's just so, my gosh, when you come close to it in that sense, it really kind of focuses your mind, right?
it does, and I would imagine it's quite shocking for you. And you've got this responsibility of, what do I do? How do I support? Right. I see
Yeah,
this
exactly.
amongst the volunteer network and family members and friends. You kind of you see a certain look in their eyes. They're like a pained look in their eyes. They want support. You can see that, but they don't know how to, and that's very difficult. I always say, my partner Helen, we've been together a few years now, but she doesn't have Parkinson's, but she very much is living with Parkinson's, and it very much affects her life as well as mine. So it's the community is not just those that are with the condition; it's those loved ones that surround us,
Yeah.
and because it affects so many, not just 166,000 of us in the UK that are living with it. Yeah. The conclusion of that episode was, we all have our different version of the condition. The rate of
Exactly.
progression, your friend saying, your friend progressing quite quickly. Typically happens if you're diagnosed slightly later on in life. The younger you are, the slower the progression, but the more complications you develop. And but even just how we respond to treatments, the sort of different symptoms that we have. Not everybody has a tremor, for example. Some people are suffering with their speech and cognition. Other people are suffering with various pains and ailments, physical ailments. It's a very complex condition to understand, isn't it? I always think if I didn't have this condition, how would I get my head around it? Because
Yeah, it's
no one
because
size
I
fits all.
didn't. And I think that's the thing that's what struck me very much when I was listening this morning. I was thinking to myself, we make quite an interesting distinction in our minds, in our world, Kuhan, about the saying that diversity is not inclusion. And that distinction is very important for reasons that we'll talk about in a moment in terms of the belonging piece. But the idea of, and I hope I get this correct, and please get me right, the difference
Mm,
between Parkinsonism and Parkinson's is a very interesting idea because I think you could say, if you're someone like me who is an outsider, just assumes that Parkinson's is Parkinson's, right? But that's a little bit like saying diversity is just, oh, that group of people, or that group of people, or that group of people. But the reality is that everybody's Parkinson's journey, I suspect, just like everybody's belonging journey, is unique. Right? It's unique to them, is it not?
the condition is as unique as we are, right?
Right.
It's exactly that. And I mean, partly that's life, and Parkinson's teaches you a lot about life. Diagnosed at a fairly early age of 38, it was the first shock to the system in terms of suddenly realised I was mortal. It was the first
Yeah.
and only
Yeah.
condition, touch wood, that I've got and I'm living with, but I wasn't prepared for it. And I think that's a part of the shock of when you're diagnosed when you're younger. Is, it's not on your radar at all. To get your head around it, whatever age you are, is quite difficult. But yeah, within the isms of Parkinson's, you have various sub-conditions, of which Parkinson's disease is the most common, as you probably heard on that episode. But
Yes. Yes. Yes.
even even within Parkinson's disease, there are different characteristics of the condition that are present in some patients and not others. So how on earth do you get your head around that? Either living with the condition or Joe Public, and one of the frustrations is amongst Parkinson's community that Joe Public don't really understand the condition. It is a frustration to live with, and it is a frustration to explain the condition. 13 years in, I'm not sure I'm any better at doing it, but I've had a go, and hopefully, just talking about it and sharing experiences has some value to others in the wider community.
It really does, and I just would encourage you to keep on because it was particularly instructive for someone like me who doesn't know really anything about
Mm.
Parkinson's. And interestingly enough, if I can say this to you, with our girlfriend, I don't actually want to ask the questions because I'm not sure. I don't want to pry too much. So actually, being able to come aside and go, "Oh, oh, oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
That was really useful for me." I like the way you started this because it kind of goes into our conversation where you
Mm,
talked about the idea of isolation and how
mm,
that impacts you in terms of belonging. Because I guess, I'm going to make a point and then ask a question. Given that you came to this condition when you were 38 years of age, prior to that, so in the 37, 8 years that preceded it, would you have identified yourself as having a belonging issue, having an
mm.
isolation issue, or would you have felt very well socialized? And the reason I ask is because the reason that this subject is particularly of interest to me is that I'm care experienced. So I come from, I was raised in care. So, and people that are raised in care are very interested in the subject
Okay.
of belonging because the problem
Mm,
is we don't belong anywhere. So, I don't know my mother, I don't know my father. I've been raised in orphanages and foster homes, all sorts of things. So I have like a real issue about this because I think that um, belonging is a really primal need.
it
And
is.
so I've had this kind of ache in my soul for the last 6 decades and more about wanting and trying to find that place to belong. So to hear you say that when you were diagnosed with Parkinson's at 38, that triggered that sense of unbelonging or isolation is very interesting to me because I wonder whether, so what I'm wondering to myself is it I'm wondering what's the harsher thing? It's a bit like being, is it worse to be born blind or to go blind? I'm wondering about which of those states brings the most trauma. I suppose they both do, right, in their own ways.
They do. I think if you've lived half your life without a condition and suddenly it's presented to you, then it is a shock to the system in a way that you wouldn't have if you were naturally born with a particular ailment.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Having said that, in answer to your initial question about what life was like before I was
Well,
diagnosed,
yeah.
did I have a sense of belonging? I think I was quite an independent person.
Okay.
Uh, I didn't need lots of people. I didn't need lots of group. For me, belonging in the first instance is about belonging to myself and accepting myself. And I was quite comfortable in a way in that. I mean, let me put it this way: things were missing in my life, but it wasn't really to do with health. It was more to do with like um, having a partner, loving partner, which
Sure, sure.
Parkinson's actually gifted me that because I was with a different partner before.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things that the condition did is just open my eyes into what mattered and what didn't matter,
Oh, wow.
and it allowed me to be more open, and it allowed me to develop friends and relationships that I wouldn't have been gifted if I didn't have this condition. Quite frankly, now don't get me wrong, I'm going to sound quite poetic about the condition. I wouldn't wish it on anyone in the world.
I
It's a
can
very
imagine.
cool
Of course
condition, but
not. Of course not.
it does give as well as it takes. So, and yeah, one of the things it's given is the gift of love and friendships and relationships, closer connections to family, and just an understanding of an appreciation of life that I didn't really have before. You know, time would just go by before. Now I just count every moment. You know,
Mm.
every day. You know, wake up and I appreciate it. I wake up and it's a scorching hot day, and it's today, and we're in the summer. Um, and it's a beautiful day. You know, I'm looking outside at some trees, the wind's blowing, and talking to you, Paul. We haven't met today, so you know, for me, that's a good day, right?
Isn't
That's a
that
really good day, and I wouldn't have had that kind of realization before, or unless I had this condition, unfortunately. So, in that sense, gratitude is what I think I'm trying to
I've
explain.
just
Yeah,
I just scratched that down on my notepad as so
we're in
gratitude.
tandem
I
here.
mean, it's just, but that's, as I mean, you said I'm not being poetic about it, but then I'm talking and I'm listening, I'm thinking, what a lovely spirit of gratitude, and I wonder just in its own right how healing and restorative gratitude is as a way of, the things that happen to us in life,
Yeah.
Kuhan, either make us bitter or they make us better, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I like that phrase actually. I might steal that one for
Well, they do, right? And
it's very true, it's very
they
true.
do. And
It
I
is
and I and if it feels like you've embraced the better rather than the bitter, which
uh,
it's extraordinary.
I'd like to think so. Don't get me wrong, it's taken me a long time to get here, you know, because
Oh,
like
of
I said, for the
course.
first decade or so, I just wouldn't utter the words, I wouldn't tell people. For the first 6 years, I didn't tell my own family, my parents that I had this thing that was Parkinson, so it took me a long time, and even now when I say it out loud that I have Parkinson, every time I gotta introduce myself, a part of me thinks, "Shit, that's me. I'm talking about myself." But it's very surreal for me because there are moments in the day that I can feel fairly normal-ish. You know, if my brain's doing what it should be doing, if my implants doing what they should be doing, my medication is doing what it should be doing, I can feel relatively normal and almost forget, even this many years into the condition. Doesn't last for long, don't get me wrong, but I savor the moments. I savor those moments in the day that are good, and I try and remember, and I try to appreciate, and I try to not be bitter in a way. Maybe I was before um, about life. Not that I was a negative person, but I didn't have a real full appreciation of life in a way that I do now. Things become a lot clearer in a way. What I'm describing here, Paul, is a grieving journey. I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief.
Of course.
Well,
Kubler Ross,
exactly.
Ross,
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
and and if I had my time again, I'd love to go into that space, but it's a bit late for me now. But as a career, but as an observation, what I've gone through the last 13 years plus is a grief journey. I started with the classic, I'm in denial. Started with the, I was angry. I was trying to get to terms with it. Then eventually, like I said, fast forward a decade or so, I started to get some form of acceptance. I started to talk about it, started to give back as well, because that's the other part of that grief cycle, and that's why giving back is so important because it's part of healing. It's part of healing
Mm.
to connect with others, and like you said, it's a natural human instinct to connect and to belong. Part of that, from a purely selfish point of view, is just if I give back, if I do something that I think is doing others good, then from a selfish point of view, I'm really happy because that makes me feel good.
There's a there's so much. Hopefully, we'll get around to talking about belonging in a minute. But this is actually such an interesting line of inquiry. We've got a model that we use in our practice, which is about the sort of these five principles of self leadership. Um, and it's about managing your attention instead of managing your time. It's about managing your energy. But where it gets up to the end of the model, we talk about these two kind of really interesting things. And one, the bit that I'm really intrigued about is the two bits, is about the fourth bit in the model is about we grow by helping others grow.
Mm,
And the fifth element is that to be committed to something that is bigger than yourself.
mm,
And the reason say that to you is because um, I wanted to, if I may, forgive me, just to take you back to something and just offer you a
yeah,
gentle nudge on something.
mm,
Um, 12 or 13 years ago,
yeah,
I was older than you
mhm,
are now
mhm,
and we started this consultancy.
mm,
And what I'm saying to you, you said it was a bit too late, right? Uh, can I tell you the what you bring apart from lived experience and apart from such a wonderful restorative healing energy, and we're not even in the same room, and I feel like I'm benefiting from it, is that you bring wisdom and you bring hopefulness, and the idea that you couldn't be anything other than an absolute force for good as a coach, as a therapist, as a mentor, as a facilitator. I mean, there's so many things you could do in the people space if you wanted to turn this into a career that would be so exciting. And so I just encourage you about that because I think that could be really interesting. And yeah, I just say that. So there you are. And
thank you.
that's not
Yeah,
great. That's just really important because um,
never say never.
never, well, not only never say never, but the other thing is that um, what you might not necessarily appreciate, and forgive me if it sounds a bit patronizing, it's not meant to be, is that you're in the second half of life. What you're now doing is
Mm,
you're in your wisdom years, right? And you were kind of maybe crowbarred into your wisdom years because of the condition.
mm,
The fact of the matter is that we all start those journeys, don't we? About it's about me, and then I kind of exhaust myself on all my meism, and then maybe it's about us, which is also fairly self-serving. But ultimately, it comes to a place where you've arrived quicker than most, where it's about you. And when your energy and when your orientation is about others, you are doing something very interesting. So I just would encourage you not to discount if that was something you wanted to do, that as an idea. But anyway, I'll put that to the side. And by the way, if you ever want to talk about it, come and talk to us because we can definitely point you in the right direction.
excellent. Yeah. Oh, so nice to hear. Thank you very much.
No,
Your warm words.
it's important. So let's talk a little bit
Mm,
about purpose, about belonging, if we may. What
mm.
does belonging actually mean to you? And why does belonging matter right now for people involved in Parkinson's UK?
Well, I think you might have uttered the word purpose there. I don't know if it was
I did, and it came out of
yeah,
my mouth, and I thought, oh, we're talking about belonging, but actually, purpose is probably a good word
yeah.
to talk about.
I mean, ultimately, I have found a purpose in life, and it's taken me a diagnosis of Parkinson's to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah.
I do realize that sounds ironic, but,
Mm,
I think having particularly as I've stopped work my day job about 5, 6 years ago now, that leaves a big gap, both financially but emotionally as well, and, I see this a lot in the community. People stop their lives in a way that they don't necessarily have to. I think I was fortunate in that I could fill it with a sense of purpose and put that to good use. You know, the things like doing the podcast, things like being a volunteer, things like getting involved in the research world, things like being involved in the wider Parkinson's community, fundraising, raising awareness. It's like on top of having this condition, it's all very much like a full time job, actually. But it's a rewarding job. It's the first time, if it is a job, it's the first time my personal and work life have come together in a way that, you know, I had not a boring office job before, but something that wasn't really personal to me. And now every day I'm living and breathing this condition. And more often than not, I'm talking about this condition. And more often than not, I'm talking about just life generally and about lessons for life. And I think that's a wonderful sense of purpose. And to be able to share that and have these sorts of conversations, wow, it's like for me, that's like so rewarding. It's just so uplifting. It's so um, enlightening. You know, I've learned more about myself in the last few years than I have done in a lifetime. I am quite aware that there are less years ahead of me than behind me. And part of this, like I said, is a natural aging process. We become wiser when we get older, don't we, Paul? But Parkinson's does make you older than most would
I am.
ordinarily be at this
Yeah,
age, right? It's
I
an
am.
accelerated form of aging almost. And part of that acceleration, I think, is part of that progression. If you're talking to neurologists, they'll talk about the progression of the disease. Yes, my disease has progressed. My condition has progressed. Life has become very tough. But in another way, I've progressed in myself. You know, I've progressed in life. I've progressed in understanding the world. Or better understanding the world. I'm not, there's still a lot for me to learn, and I'm very keen to learn. But I think you need that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging to enable that. There's got to be something. You can't just leave a void. Unfortunately, there's got to be something.
Do you know, it's so interesting. There is, I think, a real, crisis of meaninglessness in the world,
Mm.
and I think what's so interesting just listening to you talk there is exactly that. That what you have is a very clear and obvious sense of meaning. And to me, we work in some very interesting sectors. Whether it's, I mean, we do the privilege to work with yourselves, and we do a couple of some other things in the third sector, with some really interesting charities and not for profits. But we also work with investment bankers and media people and IT people and all sorts of intriguing folks from all over the place. And one of my kind of clearest observations on life, particularly this late on in it, is that it's tragic if you've got lots to live on, but you have nothing to live for. That's sad. And I think that this idea that you have something to live for is very powerful, you know, because it's what it is. It's just the more generative of the things. So I think where you're going with this is really interesting. And look, I think also, whereas you are aged in the process of Parkinson's, when you get to my age, you know, into my kind of older mid 60s, you do start to feel that mortality. You do start to feel that level of, well, I, you know, don't want to tell people how old I am anymore because it opens the door to the reality that there's more behind you than there is in front of you. But it now becomes about quality rather than quantity, right? It now becomes about saying, how do I use this time and not waste it? How do I use it doing things that are meaningful?
It's
And I
such
think,
a. I was just going to say, it's such a precious commodity, isn't it? Time.
yes,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me about this. I want to pursue you a bit more on this belonging piece.
mm.
I'd love to hear you on this. About tell me about a time when you've really felt that you belonged, and when you felt that sense of belonging, um, what was happening, and what did people and were people and perhaps are people doing create that feeling of belonging for you?
I can think of one very tangible example of literal belonging in the Parkinson's context, actually.
Okay.
Parkinson's UK, you may be aware, had these Parkinson's walks up and down the country throughout
I
the year.
know that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There and there was one in near me in Battersea Park last year. In fact, they run it every September, I think it is. And me and Dave have gone along for the last 3 years, wearing our Parkinson's blue t-shirts, and it is a very definition of community there. You'll see 300 plus people, all in a blue t-shirt. Firstly, so we're all looking the same, um, either having the condition or related to the condition somehow, or volunteered for the condition, a supporter of the charity, whatever it is, with a common cause, with a common focus. And I know this sounds obvious, but I didn't like those events previously.
Uh-huh.
When I don't like crowds, and I don't like big gatherings, and I don't like big groups, and I don't like I don't feel the need for to physically belong in the sense of a wider, bigger group of people. What I do feel like is a belonging as a sense, as a feeling, as a common connection by way of empathy. And I always say empathy trumps sympathy when it comes to this condition. Having that just little bit of understanding of the condition, a connection to it. We were talking before we hit record, and you telling me a bit about your friend with Parkinson's. For me,
Yeah,
like, that brings us a little bit closer together. And even if you didn't, the fact that you're inquisitive and you're asking the right sort of questions, you're willing to listen. I think listening is a very big part of this as well, not just talking. Very big part of belonging is to listen. Um, but that day stood out for me, or those days stand out for me, and I've been to quite a few of those events recently. In the first 8, 9, 10 years, I was deliberately avoiding those events because I thought I didn't like those events. I didn't like the big hordes of people and noise and the busyness of it. But what I've learned is it's not so much the event itself; it's that feeling of connection,
it's
and
really
it's
interesting.
very difficult to describe, isn't it, Paul? But
It's
for me, it's very, very, very real.
it's such a nice example because you you said, everyone's in 300 people all in blue t-shirts, all looking the same, and I thought, yeah, that's true. But the real issue there is not the uniformity, is it? It's the unity.
Oh yeah, I like that.
It's
Yeah,
it
very
it's
much.
that that's the
Yeah,
key, isn't it? Can I backtrack for a second because
yeah.
you prompted a thought that I had before, but I moved away from it, and that was I'm wondering to myself, and I'm particularly I was thinking, as I've been listening, I've been thinking to myself, I wonder if part of the reluctance to disclose,
Mm,
this is me putting my words in your mouth, so they're not
mm,
your words, so feel free to spit them back out again.
mm.
I wonder if there's any sense about, um the stigma of a condition, but then whether or not you find your identity that you've got Parkinson's, is your identity that you're Kuhan?
I mean, you said it beautifully, and that really does resonate. That is exactly what I feel. For me, um, Parkinson's is taking away my independence. That's one of the
Yeah,
cruelties of the
yeah,
condition.
yeah,
But I'm also very conscious that it could potentially take away my identity, and I find that very difficult to deal
yeah,
with.
of
To be honest with
course.
you, taking away the gift of a smile or a gift of a conversation, the gift
Yeah,
of speech, the gift of touch, the gift. Once it starts taking that away, I find that probably the most challenging aspect of the condition. Uh, and I think part of me didn't want to acknowledge that initially. Having said all of that, I think I've managed to find a way living with this condition day in, day out, that I can still protect my identity, maybe not my independence, because I'm very, very reliant on my partner, Helen.
you sure?
But I think I found a way to exercise my speech, exercise my voice, exercise
Yeah,
my personality in a way that counters some of the physical constraints of the condition, like fatigue and apathy, anxiety. And so I'm a very anxious person.
mm,
I've started medication for my anxiety.
Mhm,
People
mhm, mhm.
always say to me, "How can you do this podcast? How can you stand up and do this sort of thing and in front of people?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm quite a confident person, but I can still be anxious as well, right?"
Those both those things can be true, right?
Both those things can be true, exactly.
They can both be true at the same time, as the politicians are very fond of saying at the moment, and it's absolutely correct. They really can. They really can. The interesting thing about, and I suspect this may happen with you, something because you have this sense of purpose, and because you also have a sense of real passion when you're talking, is it contagious listening to you. One of the really helpful things about working on purpose is that you forget yourself. And it's that forgetting that is really opens up a whole new space for you. So, yeah, which is kind of interesting. So that's really helpful. Tell me, we were talking about belonging, and I was saying at the beginning that we've got these what we call these belonging cues, and the first of those belonging cues is feeling safe. And I think that example of Battersea with the fun run is a nice example of that. But tell me, when you think about um, a somebody that might be just diagnosed, somebody
Mhm.
that is volunteering with people and maybe feels a bit of an awkward advocate to support those people. Um, what do you think helps people feel safe enough to speak on both sides of the conversation? The person that's got the condition, the person that's living with someone who's got the condition, or in the case of my girlfriend, who we adore her. And how do you end up feeling safe enough to ask the questions you want to ask, or to admit the mistakes that we make, or to for you to talk about the things that get in the way. And incidentally, I was fascinated to listen to you talk about your holiday, and I was thinking to myself, it would never have occurred to me that walking on a sandy beach would be a problem. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, wait a minute, I need to completely rewire everything I'm thinking about. So how do you create that level of, I guess it would be psychological, to enable the person with the condition, the person that cares about the person with the condition, to actually talk to each other in an honest, not sort of, going around the houses kind of way.
I think listening, like I said before, is a big part of it, right? Just giving them time and space. Time, particularly for people with Parkinson's who struggle with their speech or their cognition to get their words out.
Yeah.
Um, or they might be talking quietly or, just face to face, ideally. Look at them in their eyes. I'm a big believer in looking at people in their eyes. It seems to be a lost art these days, but you can tell a lot, and you can connect in a way with genuine genuine empathy by creating a place where you just sit and listen and give them some time, give them some space to be able to talk. Because I guarantee you, you listen to anybody with Parkinson's, they've got a story to tell you. They really have. And I've heard it over and over again. I don't mean to say that every story is the same when I hear it over and over again. You talk about the newly diagnosed, but typically there's most people have quite a horrendous diagnosis story to tell. Mine took over a year. I got misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was told in a rather brutal way, and I've heard this over and over again. Like you're watching the same movie but with a different actor each time, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds familiar. But even hearing it again is rewarding for me, and I can feel how healing it is for them. By them, I mean maybe it's a guest on the podcast, for example, for them to be able to share that story in a way that they haven't been able to do previously in a safe space. A lot of my coming out, and I do view my
Nice phrase.
yeah, I do view it as a coming
Mhm.
out. We've done an episode on this before, uh, called "Coming Out," actually, um, coincided with COVID and lockdown and things moving online. And I was a bit hesitant at first, taking part in these sort of conversation because I was very self-conscious about how I looked. I don't mean from a vanity perspective. I mean from a symptom perspective, because
Mm.
you're catching me at a fairly good time at the moment. But maybe later in the day, I won't appear like this. Or if I rewind last year before my brain surgery, I couldn't sit still in this chair. I was I was just moving and wriggling around so much, so some of that is eased. But, I didn't like appearing on camera. If I rewind 5 years or maybe even just before COVID and lockdown, there used to be a practice in meetings where the chairperson would say, "Right, everyone, can you turn your cameras on, please?" No, I don't wanna do that. I'm embarrassed.
Oh, boy.
And, part of the reason that the podcast works so well for us is that, most of the time we're not on camera, most of the time it's audio only, and I love audio only anyway because it's quite immersive, and Dave started his career in radio as well, so it's very familiar to him. And, I just think you can connect to people in a way through listening and through audio in a way that sometimes you don't really get at big events or big face-to-face occasions. I think there's something very personal about this, Paul. What you and I are doing. I know there's going to be dozens of people, hundreds of people listening to this after the event, but for me, this is to focus on this conversation and to focus on Paul right now. For me, is like it's just I don't know, very powerful, very moving, and very meaningful. And I think the online world, I think, is very interesting to analyze in that respect because there's a lot of damage it's done, even in the Parkinson space, but there's a lot of good it's done in connecting people.
That's such a thoughtful answer, and, I mean, my big takeout from that is the importance of listening and listening in our language cleanly to somebody because I think that's part of the problem that um, even if we're not talking about us having a conversation between somebody who wants to understand a condition and someone who wants to help someone who wants to understand it, half of the problem that we're confronted with, Kuhan, is we talk about this in our corporate space a lot is that we live in transit these days. And what I mean by that, and I think the online world has made this even worse. And what I mean by that is we're typically either on our way from somewhere or we're on our way to somewhere. But where we're never is here. We're just here and present. And our minds are so busy with all sorts of different things. And the ability to just come clean and come fascinated and come eager to learn and curious is a dying art. And I think the interesting thing about the online world and in the corporate space, we see this a lot. The amount of times I'll go onto a meeting uh, and it will be the person I will go to next and they'll come, "Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm just running a few minutes late for my last meeting." And then you're coming to the end of the meeting. They go, I'm so sorry. I got to go to. I'm on to the next meeting." And so there's never any time to just have any reflection time, any quality time, any being here time. We have a client who was a very famous media person, made lots of shows that I'm sure you probably loved and enjoyed. And I remember when I was working with her and her organization, she said, "I've decided to buy my everyone in our business a Zoom cushion." And I said to her, "What's a Zoom cushion?" And she said, "The Zoom cushion is 10 minutes before every meeting to just rest your mind." It's such a lovely idea, but we don't do that. And the other thing I'm just super interested in, and it really resonated with me. As a facilitator, one of the things that you're really obsessed about is making sure everyone's got their camera on. Right? That's a real obsession because people go, everyone's got to have their camera on. And what's going on in the mind of the facilitator is if people don't have their cameras on, some people are going to feel safe, some people are unsafe. But if we believe the best about people, the reason you're not putting your camera on is because not you're doing your emails in the background or you're watching the World Cup. There may be a better reason that needs to be thought through. So you telling me that story is actually a real gift to me because that just is a lovely gift. So thank you for that. Thank you. Let me, if I may, push you on to something slightly different. And
Yeah.
we talked about feeling safe, and I love what you've said about that. I think that's really helpful. And the way that to create safety is to listen and lean in, which is really very important. Um, Tell me about feeling connected. Again, I've got this lovely context of the Battersea Park fun run.
Mm.
But I wanna move from kind of just inclusion to genuine connection, and I don't belittle inclusion in that sense, because what I mean is this: what's the difference between being one of the 300 in a blue shirt, in a blue t-shirt at Battersea Park, and feeling genuinely connected with the other 299 people. Um, what helps connection and what breaks it?
To be honest, I'd struggle to answer this. I do think that inclusion is a term and a concept that's somewhat been derailed over the last few years. Derailed, that's not the right word, but
It's the yeah, shipwrecked, but yes, all of the above. It's been
yes,
it's been for a reason that I'll explain to you, and but I would love to hear what you would think about that.
you know, the fact that the 300 people there, they all have at least one thing in common, and that's Parkinson's, whether they have it themselves or a
Yeah.
loved one has it. And I feel like I can have this sort of conversation with them in a way that if you're not dealt a shock with in life, particularly a degenerative condition that deteriorates over time, that other people don't quite get it. I've seen others react, non Parkinson's people react to my diagnosis or not react, not knowing how to react. But in that environment, in that situation, I feel like the blue t-shirt that we're all wearing is just a metaphor for this thing that we have. The thing that we have is not the condition. The thing that we have is this wonderful community. And I see so many characteristics resonate amongst people with the condition in this community that I can recognize. And it's very difficult for me to describe it in words, but it's almost like I can diagnose somebody without even, I don't mean their condition, but I can tell that they have Parkinson's, or I can tell the look in somebody's eyes whether they have a loved one with Parkinson's. That's
Mm.
like helpless feeling of a mother or a daughter or a,
Mm.
that wanting to help. It's that same look, it's just etched in my mind that I can see over and over again, or I can hear in a voice over and over again. And they might be using different words, they might be a different person, but there's a common connection, and I don't really know how to describe it, but it is a connection. It's not about being necessarily part of this club or being included in a club. It's a common connection. It's something that binds us, something that lives in us in a way that I just can't describe it any more than that. Uh, to be honest with you, and so many of these events recently where I'm just standing up and saying, well, telling people that I have Parkinson's and doing this sort of thing. And I really do enjoy it. I love doing the podcast, really do, because I think of it as therapy almost. I didn't talk about my condition or myself much for, well, a lifetime, certainly the last first 10 years or so. So now I'm kind of getting it all out as part of that coming out process. But it strikes me, it's almost like you're going to one of these AA meetings where you stand up in front of this friendly group of people. You say hello, you say your name, and they say hello back to you, and you tell them that you've got this particular ailment, and they all get it, and they all give you a round of applause or a smile. I feel like, by the way, I'm not belittling alcoholics or any kind of addiction, but I feel like there is a bond there that exists in that safe circle, that safe space that I find kind of just resonates with me, and I can compare it to the Parkinson's community. And again, I can't really describe it as anything in any more detail than that, or any. I'm sure I'm not doing it justice. All I can say, it's a very warm, loving.
Uh, it doesn't need many more explanation because it's so beautifully put the way you framed it. And here's what I'm hearing listening to you, and it's super interesting actually because I'm thinking about. I told you that I'm raised in care, and we have a podcast which is I run with somebody else who's care experienced, and one of the things I can tell you is that I can tell you a person who's been raised in care from 100 yards down the street because
Ah,
I just know, right? And what's interesting when you get care experienced people together is, and actually this is true of all kind of stigmatized communities. Um, I can just talk without having to explain.
Yeah, that's priceless.
And that's very powerful, right? So my wife is a therapist, and she part of her practice. She's a woman of color, and she works with uh, in part of her practice is working with black professionals. And what's really helpful for them is that they don't have to explain themselves. She you just talk because she's a woman of color. She knows exactly what the story is, and there's something quite interesting about that. But what I was really taking away from what you had said is maybe the kind of real secret source of inclusion. And the thing that makes inclusion so beautiful is inclusion is about non-judgment.
Mm.
And so when you come into an environment where you are it's judgment free and you're living without that sense of judgment, there's it's a very and the accompanying radical acceptance that goes alongside that, that is a very empowering idea. And one of the problems I think, which is why the DNI space, the diversity and inclusion space, so contested, is because people confuse diversity with inclusion. Diversity is about being other, right? Now the problem is that the way we've set it up is we've said other means black or I've got a disability or I've got a whatever else it might be a particular characteristic, but it doesn't mean that. It actually means being unique. And the thing that's interesting is it's not that there are 9 aspects of diversity. There are 8 billion aspects of diversity because nobody is the same. And what's really interesting is that when what we try and do with our work, Kuhan, is we try and find that thread, that connective tissue, that common humanity that makes us human. And your story about being human is a story that includes uh, a Parkinson's journey. It includes all sorts of other richness that makes you uniquely who you are. And when we can then come together and recognize, and by the way, the reason why Enolla is called Enolla is because it reads all one backwards. The reason why we can come together and say, "We're just all one. Tell me your story," it becomes very exciting. So that connectivity for me is really powerful. I'm conscious of time and conscious of taking much too much of your time, which I could gladly spend the rest of the day doing. But let me ask you about our third belonging cue, which is about shared future. And I guess here I'm thinking to myself, you've talked very honestly about future and about the potential for that future being curtailed, as certainly as far as duration is concerned. But what does shared future mean for someone's lived experience, do you think? What helps people, I suppose, feel their voice matters and they're bigger, they're part of something bigger. You've talked about that, how what you do in Parkinson's gives you you haven't used the language of voice, but I feel like it really sits under that.
I think I don't know if it's subconscious or not, but I haven't used the word voice because I'm conscious that not everybody with Parkinson's, a lot of people with Parkinson's lose their voice for one reason or the other.
Yeah, yeah, physically lose their voice.
Physically, but also, it's a condition that, like I said, tends to isolate. So, for
Yeah, that's
example,
so powerful, and actually that's such a powerful point. Psychologically, they
yeah,
lose their voice.
yeah, well, yeah, and also 1 in 3 people live alone with this condition.
Yeah, that's
One
really
in 1 in 4 have suicidal thoughts. 1 in 9 have living in a care home. 1 in 3 living with the double whammy of Parkinson's and dementia. Right? There's so many parts of this community, this quite varied community that are so isolated and don't have a voice for so many different reasons that I think, if I can say, put it this way, I would encourage anybody to speak up, literally or otherwise. And I say otherwise, I mean, I see a lot of people do some beautiful writing in Parkinson's poetry. So Parkinson's, the other aspect of Parkinson's and dopamine, the chemical that we all lack in our brains, people with Parkinson's, is creativity. So a lot of people, when they take the pills, the medication, it triggers different creative instincts. A lot of people turn to writing,
Oh, really?
storytelling, or whether it's poetry, or whether it's art as a therapy, or painting. In my case, it's more photography and stuff that I do with the podcast. It allows me to be
Wow.
creative.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anyone to just express themselves in any way, shape, or form that they feel comfortable doing. And I tell you, it really does resonate. I didn't think it did. It took me a long time to realize that words matter and my words matter. And if not to anyone else, then to me, because I think it's important that, I do say these things out loud for my own sake, for my own mental health. One of the ironies I've learned over the last few years, I have a counsellor, and I've had him for been seeing him once a week or once a month now for the last 4 or 5 years. And it dawned on me, or rather, he pointed it out a few years in. He goes, "You know, we're never actually talking about Parkinson's, are we? We're actually talking about your symptoms, or maybe we are, but the nux of it is more about me than it is about the condition. The condition becomes almost like a I don't want to say an excuse. That's too strong a word, but we frame it in the context of of Parkinson's. But a lot of it is just about me, and there's a lot of it about individuals and humanity. You said earlier about two words that I wrote down as you were speaking. Talked about destination and the transit, and we're
Mm.
focused on those things, and not really appreciating life is about the journey itself, right? Again, I don't want to sound too poetic, and I'm sure I'll listen to this back and think and cringe, but the
I
thing
hope.
I've learned, the thing I've learned is that it is about the journey and the enjoyment of the journey and the gift of conversation, the gift of connecting with people.
Yeah. Do you know what? Kuhan, when I was about 8, I was rubbish at arithmetic, right? I've always been terrible at maths. And, I remember, but I've got quite a good mind. I remember shapes. So I remember shapes and sizes, and if I had a book and I didn't put a bookmarker in it, I would be able to find where I was because I'll just visually remember where it was on the
Mm.
page. Yeah, so my mind works like that. I did a maths test when I was about 8 years old. I was so pleased with myself, and I knew the answers, so I wrote all the answers down, and the teacher came back and said, gave me a mark. She just said it had an F, failed, and I said to her, "Well, sorry, why have I got an F? I've got all the answers right." She said, "Well, let me explain something to you about mathematics." I said, "Go on then." She said, "And arithmetic in particular." I said, "Well, go on then." So she said, "You don't get the mark for the right answer. You get the mark for the working it out." And she said, "You don't know how you worked it out, do you?" And I went, "No." She goes, "You just remember, didn't you?" I went, "Yeah." And she said, "That's not learning." It's a bit like that with life.
It is.
You don't get the mark for getting to the end. You get the mark for the working it out, and you're
It's not
working it out.
it's not binary, right? It's not black and white.
No,
It's all about the colour in life. Absolutely.
100,
What's the enjoyment of it? Yeah.
100%. And also, just an encouragement for you, just I know we're moving towards an end, but I think it was also really interesting just hearing you talk about that whole piece about voice as well, because I was thinking to myself, part of the wonderful part of this is the idea of finding your voice, which you've obviously done,
Yeah.
and then the next joy is to help other people to find theirs, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and that might come out in different forms,
Yeah,
but I think
exactly.
expression is very important, um, and it could be with others, or it could be in a way, could be in written form, it could be in artistic form, whatever it is,
Anything, yeah.
any form, because you don't. I always think you don't have to be alone to be lonely. Firstly, and just because you are in a community, that doesn't mean you're suddenly not lonely, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's something about belonging to yourself, acceptance of yourself, finding your own way first, um, and having that as a platform just allows you to just grow and connect with others in a way that I don't think, certainly in my case, I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have that foundation in myself and loving myself, if I can put it like that. As again, being rather cheesy and poetic, but take pride in yourself. I always say to people with Parkinson's, pat yourself on the back. You're living with this horrendous condition that day in, day out takes a little bit more away from you. Daily life is difficult and challenging. So, and yet you're turning up and you're showing up. And
Totally, totally. Totally. Kuhan, what you used the phrase coming out, and I was so pleased to hear you say it because it made me smile because one of the areas in my much later in my life that I came out on about was spirituality. I'm someone who's
Mm,
has a spirituality, and as you were talking about the being alone, I remember saying to somebody, a group of people I was talking to, actually, a lovely Christian community, and I was saying to them, please understand this. You're whatever you mean by this. You're saved by faith alone, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to live alone by faith.
mm,
That's not the same thing, right? That's not the same thing.
true.
Final big question for you on
Sure.
the, on this really is just I want to just think for a minute, if I may, about the kind of moments that matter. So I think you've touched so much of this already, really nicely. But where are the moments where belonging really matters most to you? Maybe as an individual, but also perhaps as a volunteer. Where does it is it in that moment where you just feel isolated? You feel the burden of the condition, but or where does it matter the most?
I'm just going to relate this back to our podcast, not to, well, maybe a little bit for self publicity, but more to make a point about this community. We have thousands of listeners, and it takes a lot for them to sort of reach out to us. A lot of times, again, they're facing this stigma, they're facing this embarrassment. So sometimes the greatest pride that I have is when somebody that hasn't spoken about their condition comes forward and just sends us a very simple but heartfelt message to say thank you. You know, you guys are talking about things that I felt that I haven't been able to share, that others don't understand. Or I played this episode to my partner by way of explanation, and all they want to do is just say thank you. And I find that my gratitude very humbling. And sometimes
Wonderful.
doesn't have to be showy, doesn't have to be anything, but sometimes those smallest moments, the smallest acts of kindness, wow, they can go a long way. And by kindness, I just mean a smile or a thank you can really resonate, really have so much impact on individuals in a way that I hadn't really appreciated before I had this condition. So now I'm all about spreading the joy.
I love that. I love that. And that's a lovely sign of belonging actually, where somebody who hasn't ever come out before can do so. That's
My
it speaks
exactly.
very powerfully.
Yeah, you said you can spot somebody that's come from care, right?
Oh yeah, a mile away.
I hope I've used the right phrasing there, but I can spot somebody who's got Parkinson's and hasn't really spoken about it, you know? I can spot it in their eyes, I can spot it in their expression, I can see it, I can see the relief when they do reach out and the comfort it brings them, and to me, to be honest with you, because it's so rewarding.
It's so good. So final question is this: is what's the one thing that you would encourage listeners or viewers or whoever they're going to be, and however they're going to consume this, um, to help them feel that they belong? What's the one thing that you would encourage people about? So someone doesn't feel a sense of belonging, right? What would your encouragement to them be?
Be kind to yourself, use me as an example. If you want, it took me 10 years to admit that I had this condition.
Mm.
This vision of the future where it wasn't good. And I would say take comfort from examples like me or examples that are plentiful in the community, that, it's not necessarily the end here. Diagnosis does take, but it gives as well. And gives you a sense of realization that I can assure you, you're going to look at life in a way that you hadn't done before, and just take comfort on that. But just don't be hard on yourself as well, right? Don't be hard on yourself if you're not at that place now. Some people it takes a week, some people it takes a decade, and that's okay. Just do it at your own pace. Don't force yourself. Don't do it at anyone else's pace.
Do you know? I think you said it. You said it twice now, and it's such a profound thought that I certainly would never have been able to think about. But this idea that Parkinson's takes, but it also gives.
It does.
That's such an interesting idea, and to be able to think about. what it gives is just brilliant. That's just wonderful. Um, there's been so much that's rich here. Goodness me, the gratitude piece, the it takes but it gives. I mean, just brilliant. Um, Kuhan, thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, your time, and just for just a enlightening conversation. Um, I know we've obviously got the podcast to Parkies in a pod, which I found by just typing into my search engine to Parkies in a pod, and there it was. It popped up, and I, oh, this is good. And I had a whole menu of things. But people watching this or listening to this podcast, where can they go to find more information? Just like,
Yeah. Yeah, firstly, thanks. I've really enjoyed this
oh,
conversation.
been my pleasure.
I really mean that, and I love doing this sort of thing. For me, this is just a gift. So Two Parkies in a Pod can be found on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or twoparkiesinapod.com. You can also just reach out to me on social media if you want to. I go by the handle More Than a Tremor because I do believe Parkinson's is far more than a tremor. So if you want to reach out,
More than a tremor.
yes,
That's
yes.
brilliant. I love that.
And yeah, just honestly, just feel free to reach out. Just say hi. Just start that conversation. If you need somebody to help start that conversation, just say hi. I'm normally fairly responsive, so and I enjoy meeting people and connecting people in this community. So yeah, and keep listening. There's 65 episodes of the podcast, and they're all great. There's some amazing stories in there. It's a wonderful showcase to the community. The podcast.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. And of course, the Parkinson's themselves have got fantastic resources as well, right? The
This
actual
is UK, yeah. If there's one
are
thing,
amazing, aren't
yeah, but we get a lot of listeners that are newly diagnosed on the podcast
they?
reaching out
Mhm.
and saying, "Can you help here? What do I do? Can you give me some tips?" Almost. The one thing I tell them to do is just call the helpline, the Pugs UK helpline. It's a free phone number that's stopped by professionals, and I don't mean this as a cop out. Say, "Oh yeah, just call the helpline," but it's a wonderful resource and the great online resources as well. The walks are fantastic. We know what exercise does for this condition. There's a positive benefit. It's a wonderful community. Ease your way into it. Don't worry about, you don't have to have the camera on, metaphorically or not.
No, no,
Just feel free to reach out. And also, if you are a friend or a family member of somebody living with the condition, don't wait for them to put their hand up. It's very difficult for people with Parkinson's to put their hand up. Don't wait. Just offer your hand and support because it can go a long way.
it's been a pleasure. Kuhan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Um, thank you. I'm sure everyone who listens to this is going to get so much from it. And make sure you listen to Two Parkies in a Pod.
Yeah.
Look
Shake.
forward to more next time.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Great to see you. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.